What's going on, world? It's your boy Gemini Brown here, back with another episode of Nalo Kicking Knowledge. Today, we'll be breaking down the birth chart of the legendary, the late great Nipsey Hussle. Today, as I do this marks the 1-year anniversary of his passing. And yeah, I was asked to do this a while ago, but at the time, I didn't feel the need to. I needed to really fully process it and things of that nature. And just as a word of advice, people, we got this knowledge and stuff for astrology, and it definitely empowers us and helps makes our path in life a little bit easier. But you never want to lose the sight of people being people, and just remember, people are more than their charts. And sometimes you gotta really find a balance between your understanding and remembering the fact that people are people, So yeah, with that said, let's get into it. So Nipsey was a Leo, a sun in Leo, a moon in Leo. And what's crazy is at the time of his death, there hadn't been a confirmed birth time. And I know a lot of people in the astro community, through their own knowledge, had come to the feeling that he was a Scorpio rising. And when I looked at that chart, it pretty much resonated too. But in time, a verified birth time had come about, which makes him a Pisces rising. And I could definitely see that just from a facial structure, and then also from the standpoint of how he was interacting with life. So I want to take this time to reiterate that for me, I look at the rising sign as like a secondary sun. So whenever viewing your rising sign, you want to think how can I combine this? How can I use this in conjunction with my sun? And then always keep in mind that the rising sign, the attributes of that sign is what you're going to bring to every other house within this chart. Okay? So one thing with Nipsey, at this point, he was definitely a martyr. He sacrificed a lot for the culture, a lot for his community. And definitely was a spiritually in tune guy. And just from a physical standpoint, this is the cool part. You can go and look at other Pisces risings. You'll see kind of the very pronounced eyes, kind of like bulging in a way too. So with other Pisces type people, you'll see that resemblance. So, with that, I'm going to go ahead and kind of look at this chart in terms of just how things resonated, for me. But with Nipsey being a Pisces rising, it puts the bulk of his energy, which was in Leo. So we got Nipsey as a Leo sun, Leo moon, Mercury and Mars in Leo as well. And his Mercury so happened to be retrograde. And a lot of this energy fell into his 6th house. And this brings me to one of my favorite points in astrology, that because of my energetic alignment, I've been privy to this information or this understanding. But Leo and Virgo share a very special relationship. So the 6th house is the original house of Virgo. Leo is the 5th. Leo represents the king. It represents being the life of the party, the celebrity, all eyes on me. And then Virgo represents the servant. And there's an analogy I love, and it says, Virgo cleans up the mess that Leo made. And evolutionary terms, when you transition from Leo to Virgo, it's like Leo is all about the big. Leo doesn't pay attention to the details. So there are certain things about himself and with the sun ruling Leo, Leo can be blinded by one's ego, right? And believe everything is about them. So they don't pay attention to the details of things around them or people. But then part of the self-improvement of getting ready to engage with Libra, which is the 7th house after Virgo, is having this attention to detail and discrimination and overall self-improvement. So whenever a person has Leo energy, especially pronounced Leo energy, along with Virgo energy, it creates this personal dilemma of kind of like a crisis. Like the person realizes things are not all about me. In being self-conscious and aware of themselves, they are also aware of the others around them and things around them. Okay? So Leo energy coupled with Virgo energy really creates a more humble, or someone, a Leo type with lots of humility. And that's something we definitely see within Nipsey. Okay? The reason a lot of this 6th house placement can make sense for Nipsey is because on his road to stardom, this was someone who was very service oriented. Okay? Like I said, in other houses, Leo can tend to become self-serving. Okay? So if like Leo was in the 9th house, or if Leo is in the 3rd house, the person may fall in love or be concerned with their own ideas or opinions, or just wanting to do a lot of things for themselves, put themselves first. And with Nip, it was very much so the opposite. He worked for a lot of the things that he had, and it was more of a service-oriented approach to, towards his celebrity. Okay? So when you have the sun here, this is someone who is, you know, improving or coming into their natural essence through becoming more detail-oriented, more focused on actual hard work and taking a look at themselves and seeing what they need to fix. Then the interesting part here is then we have the moon here as well. And people with a 6th house moon tend to focus on a lot of the issues around them. So as we know, Nipsey was very much so focused on the improvement of not just himself, but his neighborhood and his people as a whole. Okay, so his mind was constantly on those things. And every day was very much so a process to get better. Now, the interesting thing that we see here, and it's so Mercury and Mars are also in this house. Mercury is the natural ruler of the 6th house, and Mars, whew, I always tell people, anybody's got a reading from me knows that Mars in the 6th house is your key to greatness. There's a lot of, these are the people who can acquire lots of wealth, status through sheer hard work, because this Mars is super determined. This Mars wants to work. All right? So with his Mars and his Mercury in conjunction in this sign, in this house, we see someone who was very action oriented. They didn't wait for things to come to them, but they went and grabbed the bull by his horns. Okay? And overall with Nipsey, like I said, not only was he just a musician, but he developed his own store. He was very business minded, and this really coincided with his North Node in Taurus. A lot of the knowledge that he left us was about building wealth and ownership, and this is very much so in the 6th house mind. Anybody with a Mars or Mercury in the 6th house, or you know, just 6th house energy in general, are business oriented and really know what it is to work hard and cultivate something out of nothing. Now here's a deeper look. I've told you guys to really look into Decans before, and part of the next thing that gave Nipsey a lot of power is that he's a 23 degree Leo sun, and that decan is ruled by Mars. Okay? And then Mars having that same influence of his sun sign, it kind of just allowed him to focus his energy more on self-actualization. Okay, so the fact that his Decan ruler was in the same sign as his sun just gave him more focus and ambition towards cultivating those things. All right, and then here's the next part. The Mercury and the Mars are in the middle part of Leo, which is ruled, Decan wise, is ruled by Jupiter. And then we see Nipsey was known for communicating such knowledge and wisdom. And he had a Jupiter in Aquarius. So a lot of the wisdom he displayed was about, you know, his humanitarian ideals and about people coming together. All right? And then also with this, we see that his values, the things that he valued, or his truth in life, was also showcased through his speech. And Mars is motivation and aggression, and Mercury's communication. So this is always someone who is very much so a motivational type of speaker. When they communicate, especially in fire, they're communicating with a lot of confidence, a lot of power behind their speech. So those are some of the more intricate things that really made Nipsey. All right, and then with all this Leo energy in general, this is just someone who had talent. One of the things from his past and that really stood out to me is highlighted in this aspect of that Mars and that Mercury being in trine to Neptune and Uranus. Now, that aspect is great for popularity in general, okay? And I'll equate it in this sense. Mars trine Uranus is someone with a superior intellect, very skilled. It's almost like an inventor type of aspect, right? The mind, the rational mind, is attuned to the higher realms. One is destined to discover their higher genius. And there's loads of information that Nipsey left behind for us to go back and digest, okay? And with his Uranus in the 9th house, it just showed him showcasing to the masses his own particular philosophy on a number of different things. And like I said, there's a story that his brother had told that when they were like 14 or 15, Nipsey built a computer by himself. You know, that is Mars trine Uranus in a nutshell. Then here's the next part of it. That's Mercury trine Uranus. Mars trine Uranus is great for popularity. Being someone who their action leads to success and, you know, people wanting to get behind them. Tupac, the very much so who Nipsey was a newer version of, had his Mars in Aquarius. Okay? Uranus naturally rules Aquarius. Mars trine Uranus is similar. Okay? So he was destined to find fame. But the interesting thing here about Nipsey is that it didn't come easy. When you look at, he had a Saturn square all of this Leo energy. Okay? And Sun square Saturn shows having to work hard in life. Having to work harder than others, and really taking a look at your flaws in order to achieve greatness. And a lot of success coming later in life. And when we look back at his legacy, Nipsey been doing work, but it wasn't necessarily on a national level. It was more so of a local legend. But the older he got, the more and more the masses found out about him. Okay? So this is a great example, people, of, that's why I always tell people, squares are points of growth. That is real. You need your squares. Your squares are highlighting your problem areas or your setbacks, and the constant chipping away at that and need to make adjustments there is ultimately what leads to greatness or greater understanding of what one needs to do to be better. All right, so it's very interesting that he had those Saturn squares. Nothing in life came easy. Had he not, with that amount of Leo energy, Nipsey could have been like a child prodigy or something like that. But it shows that he had to literally put in work to gain the status that he did. And even with all he's amassed, it's not even on a level of, let's say, a Jay-Z or even a Kanye. You get what I'm saying? Who the masses, who had a lot of notoriety at an earlier time than he did. So that's some food for thought as well. But then the next interested part that I did see is with his nodes. His nodes, his north node was in Taurus, south node in Cancer. South node in Scorpio. In that it would kind of fall into the 9th house. So a lot of the wisdom in which he was displaying was already within him. Okay? And the Mercury retrograde can also signify, rediscovering or recommunicating things that they've learned in previous lives. Okay? But also being very selective with their words. So that was an interesting point. And then the North Node in Taurus really just spoke to the fact that why he was such a principled individual, okay? And why he was so wealth conscious and all about ownership, right? And using whole sign, that would end up putting the North Node in his 3rd house, which just showed why he also, was such a communicative and Gemini-like figure. A man of many different trades and things like that. Now, I'm going to go back to Mars trine Uranus. And someone asked me about this the other day and said, what do I think about that aspect? Now, we know that he suddenly passed away. Now, here's the thing just about energies in general, people. Uranus is always going to be sudden happenings, right? So the trine aspect represents that, like, sudden things through action and hard work and the things associated with that sign will lead to, big breaks and, the expansion of that Leo energy or whatever. But at the core of it, Mars and Uranus are still very erratic energies. It also shows that at any time, something sudden, good or bad, can happen. So I'll give an example. It's almost like, say a person has this aspect, right? And they get into a car accident. And after the car accident, they win a large sum of money. That was a sudden come up. So it's like taking the good with the bad. What seemed like a bad event led to this, sudden thing that helped improve my life. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword. And people who have these aspects, anything can happen to them at any time. All right? Especially when those planets are triggered by transit or whatever. All right? So, in just looking at it, Nipsey was in his passing, he was a progressed Virgo in the 7th house. A lot of his Leo energy was, progressing into that as well. And I think at his passing, Venus might have been within Pisces, squaring Mars. There was just a lot going on, and I would suggest you guys to really go put his transits up against the planets of that day, and you could kind of get the idea that something might have happened. But nonetheless, man, we thank him for his life. Like I said, if you don't really know Nipsey, there's a ton of interviews, and in every one he's given away some type of knowledge, and he spoke with this charisma that really just motivated you to want to do better. So this is my interpretation of Nipsey Hussle's natal chart. Feel free to chime in.